Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a Famicom game, and that happens to be Moon Crystal, and it was developed and published by the company Hecht. Now, I never heard about this company until I played this game, but I wanted to look into them a little bit just to see what other stuff that they've done, and apparently they've done some really weird mystery game on the Super Famicom called Hatovo Monogatari, or something like that. Well, unfortunately, that game never got a fan translation, but the other one that they've also did that I thought was kind of weird was that they did a game called United States Presidential Race, because apparently we really needed a political correct game. Well, thankfully, this game is nothing like that at all, but it also happened to be released in the year 1992, which is probably why it only stayed in Japan, and it's a side-scrolling action platformer. So, with that said, let's take a look at the story here, and yes, this one actually does have a decent story that I can tell. So the main character that you play as is Ricky Slater. And apparently there's a funky story going around where whenever there's a full moon, zombies happen to appear. But sometime later, Ricky's father has been kidnapped. But prior to being kidnapped, he actually does tell Ricky that apparently he has a special moon crystal where it has some sort of secret power that has to do with that rumor with the moon. So the main objective is that you have to rescue your father, and that's same with the moon crystal before it gets put into evil. Yeah, I don't know if I'm ever gonna get tired of saying it like that. Well, before I end it off here, the main bad guy that happens to be involved with the kidnapping is named Count Crimson. And I always happen to get reminded of one of my favorite bands, and that happens to be King Crimson, but I guess that makes sense. So that's all what you really need to know about the story, and I gotta say, the one thing that is really impressive with the game is that it does have a lot of cutscenes that do remind me of like the old Ninja Gaiden games. So this game does have a bit more story than the average action platformer on NES. So now let's get moving on to the gameplay. So as I mentioned already, it's a side-scrolling action platformer where you get to jump and use your sword and you just gotta hit stuff, you gotta get from point A to point B, but of course there are some levels that do require some small puzzles here and there. And you get to pick up upgrades along the way, where some of these upgrades can be a longer extension to your knife. And then there's a boot for double jumping, and there is extra health containers for a maximum amount of health. So it's all pretty simple stuff, and like I said in my review of Panic Restaurant, which I did not that long ago, the basics of this game are very similar within that one, but only that I do find that Moon Crystal is a much more in-depth game when it comes to its level design. Because not only are some of the levels feel much more longer, but there's also a bit more hidden areas within the game. And there are 7 stages within the game, but of course, the last stage of the game happens to be the same as the 6th stage, but only that you have to do it backwards. Kinda similar to Symphony of the Night, but only that, you know, this game is much more linear. And every stage has a boss at the end, and every time you beat a boss, and you do get to see the cutscene, which, well, I don't need to explain that, do I? So this game isn't really fully original gameplay-wise, but it does take some elements of other very well-known games. Like I said, with the cutscenes, it's very Ninja Gaiden-like, and also with the gameplay, it is kinda similar to Castlevania for many reasons. So for one, to get your upgrades, you gotta hit these chests, which is kinda similar to the whole candle whipping thing. And every time you get hit within this game, you do jump back a little bit, which is very well known for being very frustrating. But then again, Ninja Gaiden also had the jumping back thing, so, okay, maybe it just has a little bit of both things, but either way, one thing I know for sure is that there is no wall jumping within this game. But one last thing to mention before I move on is that this game does indeed have unlimited continues, which really is a great thing, so you don't have to worry about doing passwords or doing some continues, or you don't have to worry about starting all the way back at the beginning. So if you've played any other action platformers on the NES, then there really should not be any confusion. So now let's get moving on and start talking about the controls, and the controls in this one are actually really good. So the button layout is very easy to understand, just moving left and right, one attack, one jump, and then there's duck, and then there's going up onto ledges, and then that's really all you need to know. And the game also feels really good too, like I find that like the attacking and the jumping feels really responsive. And the walking also does feel good too, but there is one minor thing I do want to say here, and it's not really a big complaint, but it is something to keep in mind to whenever you do want to play this game, is that there is a pretty cool animation going on here when it comes to the turning around, ducking, and climbing onto ledges, but it is worth noting that it does take a little bit of time to adjust that. So I'm sure as you notice, when it comes to those three things that I mentioned, you do have a really cool animation cycle, but whenever you do have something like that, it usually means that they are a little bit delayed. And even with this game having that fluid animation, it actually does feel pretty fluent too. It's not like super delayed like some other games like Dragon Slayer on NES, good god, no, this game is definitely not like that whatsoever. So you gotta know what you're doing whenever you want to make a quick turnaround. And trying to get that spot to climb onto a ledge was a little bit tricky at first, but it was not unbearable to get used to. So overall, I do find that the controls in this one are really good. And even with having that animation cycle that does make things a little bit delayed, it still works really well for what it was. So now let's take a look at the other things, like the graphics. And holy shit, this is a damn good looking game. And to be quite honest, I think this might be one of my favorite looking NES games. So not only does it have a really nice color palette, but it also has a lot of really cool details to them. I also like a lot of the character designs, the cutscenes look really amazing for NES standards. And like I said about the animation, it looks really freaking cool. It does sort of remind me of the Prince of Persia games, but only that this one just feels a lot more fluent. And especially for the year 1992 for NES standards, this is like amazing shit. So I said it once and I'll say it again, this might actually be one of my favorite looking games on the system. So now, as for the game's music, if I say so myself, I think it's a pretty good OST. So a lot of the songs within this game kinda has a dark tone to it, which not only does suit the game pretty well, but also I think it sounds quite nice. But my personal favorite songs throughout the entire game would have to be the first three stages. So not only do they still have the dark tone to it, but they also do kinda have an epic vibe from it, and also it does sound kinda catchy to me. But the rest of the stages do have some good music going for it, but the first three stages are easily my favorite. But I don't think there's any like bad songs throughout the game, so at least that's a very good thing. So yeah, the music in this one is at least very good. So if you want to go out and buy this game, like I said, this is a Famicom game, so meaning that you're gonna have to import it if you do want an original copy, and I've only seen one on eBay as of right now, and that one is going for $300. Well, isn't that a little strange, because I actually remember looking up this game on eBay a couple months ago, and there was a couple of them on there going for about like $50 to $60. I don't know what the fuck happened here, but either way, I'm not going to be fretting too much on this, because I do have some good news. So the good news is that there's a lot of reproduction carts out there that you can play on your NES that do have the English patch so you can actually read the story. So if you do want to own a copy of the game and you want to play it, at least there is an easy option out there, is just get the reproduction copy. So not only is it cheaper, but you actually can do some pretty cool customizations to it to make the cart look fancy. Or you can keep it plain old gray just to keep it uniform. And I really don't think that the elitist reproduction police are going to be after you on this one, because this game like never even came out here anyways. But it's okay, those people suck anyway, so now let's get moving on to my overall thoughts on this game. So all I gotta say here is that Moon Crystal is indeed a pretty fucking great game. I do generally like almost everything about it. Like I said, the only real flaw I have with the game is really the fact that the controls in it are a little bit delayed when it came to like the walking, the ducking, and the climbing up on ledges, but even at that, they were still like far from being bad. It's just one of those things, it just takes a little bit of time to get used to, but when you do though, it does feel pretty natural. So when it came to everything else, I just really liked it a hell of a lot. Like when it came to like the game's graphics, it's a very beautiful looking game, the music was really great, and even the story was pretty good for an NES game. So with that said, I do find this to be a very underrated game, not only for NES, but even for Famicom exclusive. But as much as I love this game, I don't find it to be as good as like the usual classics that I've mentioned before, but even at that, I still find that this game is almost there. And one thing I should mention about the difficulty is that this game is pretty tough, but it's not as hard or relentless as games like Castlevania or Ninja Gaiden. But I'd say that the difficulty in this game is very fair because you do get unlimited continues, and of course the game is very fun and very satisfying when you get past a very hard part. So with that being said, I would highly recommend checking this one out. I think it's a really enjoyable 2D platformer. And that will be the end of this review, so thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.